Hello YouTube. Today I've managed to get my hands on three of the most exciting foldables on the market. That's the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold, the Honor Magic V3 and the Vivo X Fold 3 Pro. As always, we're going to take a look at the camera performance of all of them, but before we do that, I think the hardware is really important with foldables, so we're going to have a quick close-up look at all the different phones, then we'll get into the cameras. There are timestamps, so skip ahead if you only care about the cameras, and let's get into it. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold, the Honor Magic V3 and the Vivo X Fold 3 Pro, all in black. All have got matte glass rear panels. Get some fingerprint smudges on the Vivo, but not too bad. On these two, I think the Honor picks up fingerprints a little more than the Google Pixel, but none are too bad. They all look very nice, and if you choose to get the Honor in the red version with the gold trim, it's a bit flashy, but you do get a vegan leather rear panel, which you might like. The Honor and the Vivo come with cases in the box. The Honor case in particular is quite nice. It's got that vegan leather finish, and it's got a flap to protect the hinge, which I really like. You also get a front bumper protector, which is a nice inclusion, and this fold out little kickstand, which isn't the most sturdy thing in the world, but it's neatly hidden. Yeah, I like having a kickstand, especially with a foldable. Vivo's case, comparatively not so fancy. There is a very thin piece of vegan leather on like a acrylic-y plastic transparent case. You don't get a bumper for the front, and it leaves the side exposed, but both of them are better than the Pixel because that doesn't come with a case at all. You have to buy your own. In terms of the overall design, I think they all look really nice. Hard to choose a favorite. I think the Honor is a bit of a standout. I like the centrally placed camera bump, whereas it's off to the side on the Vivo, which, I don't know, just looks a little more dated to me. Still looks nice. Google's got its unique camera island in the top left, which I don't think looks as good as the Pixel 9 Pro or the Pixel 9 Pro XL, where it kind of takes up the whole rear of the phone, but it still looks decent. And you do get this squared off hinge on the side, which you might like, you might not. One of the big things between these phones is going to be the size and weight, and obviously Honor is all about slimness. Their marketing's shown that. They are very proud of how slim their phone is, and you do notice it in your pocket. Just try and get these all lined up. Here's how thick they are side by side. There's not a massive amount in it, but when it's in your hand and in your pocket, the Honor is noticeably slimmer than the other two. Despite being the heaviest and the thickest, Pixel 9 Pro Fold feels exceptionally well made. It's really confidence inspiring in your hand. It gives a nice satisfying sound when it's closed. It just feels rock solid. Another thing that's different between all of these phones is the button placement. On the Vivo, you get your power button and volume rocker side by side on the same side of the phone, and you get a notification slider, which is quite nice, so you can quickly mute your phone like you would on an iPhone or a OnePlus. Honor puts the volume rocker and the power button on different sides. So power button here, volume rocker's here. So they are right next to each other when it's folded. When it's unfolded, you've got one on that side and one on the other. So like doing a screenshot, you have to press both sides of the phone at once. It's a little odd. On the Pixel, the fingerprint reader, power button and volume rocker are side by side again, same side of the phone. But I don't like that the volume rocker is all the way down here. If I need to change the volume when I'm holding it one-handed, I have to go like all the way down here. It's a nitpick, but it does annoy me. So, cover displays. So it goes, you know, bright, brighter, brightest in the order we have them here, which does make a difference. But they're all quite good. You can see them all in bright sunny days, so it's not the end of the world. You get curvature on the sides of the Vivo, mainly just on one side of the Vivo. And apologies if you can see it, I have got a pretty nasty scratch on my screen. I don't think Vivo's glass is the most scratch resistant. I definitely have had better experience with Honor phones in that regard. But yeah, this one's also curved. You get more of a curvature on the top, on the right, on the bottom, and then on the hinge side it's a little flatter. So the pixel's completely flat, and it does have rather chunky bezels. They're quite well hidden by this dark background, but I just took a photo of this desk mat to illustrate my point. You've got big thick bezels all around and quite a big punch hole for the selfie camera. Doesn't really bother me, but it's a bit retro compared to, you know, the very slim bezels that you get on the Honor and on the Vivo. But the star of the show is obviously the main display, and there's quite a difference to be seen here. So all very large. Funnily enough, Google claims to have the largest foldable display ever, which I don't really agree with, especially with the curvy corners. If you look at it next to the Vivo, the Vivo is quite clearly larger, and you do feel that in use. When it comes to creases, I think the Pixel is easily the largest. You can see it quite clearly here. It's not bad, but the very shiny screen protector is quite similar to the Z Fold 6 screen protector. The high gloss really highlights the crease. You can see it when the light hits it. Comparatively, I think Honor has the shallowest of them all, and it's the least noticeable on your thumb. But Vivo is very close to Honor. It looks a little bigger on camera, but the difference is quite minimal, and you can easily forget about both of those. You might have slightly harder time forgetting about the pixel crease. But what I will say, this high gloss screen protector doesn't show up fingerprints as bad. It's a little more like glass. Yeah, I feel like my finger slides across it a little, with a little bit less friction. There's a lot less friction than the Honor. Honor probably has the highest friction. Yeah, smudges aren't as noticeable. You really notice the smudges on these more matte displays. So far, I've spent a lot of time with the Honor and with the Vivo. Cat hair. Whereas the Pixel I've only been using for a couple of days. So it's hard to definitively say on battery life, but I have noticed the Honor isn't particularly good with battery life. The Vivo is very good, it has a massive battery. And the Google seems decent so far, but it's hard to say. When it comes to charging speeds, the Pixel is miles behind either of these two. Honor has 66 watt wired charging, Vivo has 100 watt wired charging, and both do 50 watt wireless charging, which is over double the 20 watt wired charging of the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. So if you care about charging quickly, this one's not for you, but so far battery life seems quite good. If you charge overnight, that's not going to matter. But yeah, that's a quick overview of the hardware on these three phones. So let's jump into the main event, which is the camera comparison, and see how they do. Okay, we're on the cover screen selfie cameras of these three phones. The Google and Honor are recording at 4K 30, and both can do 4K 60, whereas the Vivo is limited to 1080p 30, can do 1080p 60 as well. All are set to their widest field of view, all quite similar from the looks of things. There's a bit of wind noise, but it's nothing crazy, and there is quite a loud road in the background, so it'll be interesting to see how the noise isolation does. Just turn around and go this way, get some sun on my face. Yeah, that's how the selfie cameras look. Of course, one of the best things about using a foldable phone is that it's just as easy to use the rear cameras for selfies as it is the front ones. So now I've got a massive rig, kind of looks like I'm holding a sail made out of expensive phones. But this is how the main camera looks on each. And of course we can switch through all the different cameras. Let's just check the autofocus. See if there's any hunting. I know Vivo has trouble sometimes. It does look like it takes the longest to switch back and forth. But yeah, we can do ultra wide as well. Get a lot more of yourself and your surroundings in, which is quite nice for like vlogging style shots. And I think all of them have autofocus. Let's check that. Google does, Honor does, and Vivo does. And if you want to be a mad lad, you can use the telephotos, but no one would ever do that. So back to the main camera of each. Let's just check out the stabilization. If I swing you around a bit and see how it does, keeping my face exposed as the light changes. Let's go into the sun over here and back into the shadow. And if the natural blur of the large censored rear cameras isn't enough for you, only the Vivo will let you do a cinematic portrait blur. Seems like the rest will only do that in photo mode. Switching around to the rear cameras, now we're going to have a quick look at stabilization. This is walking along at a normal pace on the main camera, and here's with a little bit of a jog on. Now the ultra wide on each phone. Here's walking along at a leisurely pace, and here's with a bit of a jog. Telephotos, they're quite different on each phone. The Honor and the Google Pixel are more zoomed in than the Vivo, so they should probably do worse, but we'll see. I'm walking along at a normal pace now. You can see the Pixel looks like it's jerking about a bit. What if we give it a jog? That's how that looks. Okay, we're back at the church, back in 4K 30 video mode, and we're on the ultra wide camera of each of these phones. You can see that the Pixel is actually a lot wider than the others. This heavily backlit scene, it looks like all of the ultra wides are struggling with exposing the church properly. If you switch to the main camera of each, the exposure looks a lot better now. Vivo looks like it might be the sharpest, but you never really know till you see them on the big screen. Moving to 2x on all of them, that's a digital crop. And then we'll head into the telephotos. Bit of lag on the Pixel when switching. That might get cleaned up in post-processing. The Vivo has a 6x button, but again that's digitally cropping in. If we take it to the max, that's 20x on the Pixel, 10x on the Honor, and 10x on the Vivo. Sorry, they're not perfectly lined up, but it's almost impossible. so that'll have to do. Okay, I can't figure out a way to do these all at once, so we're going to do the macro to infinity focusing test with all the phones. So like infinity, macro, infinity, macro. Now I'll try the ultra wide, macro, infinity, macro, infinity, and finally telephoto, 5x on the pixel. It doesn't actually focus that close, so are we in focus there? Probably just about. So macro, infinity, macro, infinity, macro. Honest turn, there's macro, there's infinity, there's macro, there's infinity, ultra wide, same thing. And finally the telephoto, which looks like it can focus very close. And finally the Vivo, starting on the main lens. Now the ultra wide. And the telephoto. Okay, it's now a very drizzly and dark evening. We're back on the cover cameras, and we're at 4K 30 on the Pixel and the Honor, and 1080p on the Vivo. So how are these doing with the exposure? How's the stabilization look? Yeah. Okay, now we're on the main rear camera of each phone. I can't actually see the preview window right now, so hopefully I'm in frame. But yeah, obviously this will be a lot more suitable for filming in low light situations, and with foldable it's quite easy. Okay, now just a quick stabilization test on the rear cameras at 4K 30 on all of them. We're on the main camera at the minute. This is walking along at a leisurely pace. Here's with a bit of a jog. Now we do the same on the ultra wide. Here's a leisurely pace, and here's with a bit of a jog. And finally, we'll do the telephotos, which are going to look awful. Here's what it looks like standing still. Here's a leisurely pace, and here's with a bit of a jog. Okay, back once again on the extremely dark street. We're using the cover selfie cameras right now. I'm coming up to a street light, so hopefully we'll be able to see something. But yeah, there's not a lot of light here, so these aren't going to look great. Now we're on the main rear camera of each. Again, I can't actually see the preview screen because of the phone holder I'm using, but hopefully I'm in frame all right. And yeah, here I'm walking towards the street light. Hopefully you can see something. Hopefully it's better than the selfie cameras. So yeah, how's the stabilization? How's the exposure? Now a quick stabilization test on the rear cameras. We're on the main camera of each, just walking along at a normal leisurely pace. See how this does. Now this is the ultra wide. Not looking good here. Honor's having a few issues focusing. If I give it a tap. It's very foggy, so that might make things better, might make things worse. Definitely doesn't seem to be making things any brighter. we switch around and use the telephoto cameras of each. Now this is the telephoto cameras of each. Here's what it looks like when I'm standing still. And here's what it looks like when I walk along. Time to look at some photos. So we're starting with the cover screen selfie cameras of these phones in the daytime, no portrait mode. And yeah, you can see a pretty big difference here. The Pixel has a bit of a green tint, I guess from the grass and trees around me spilling onto my face. And it looks kind of soft and washed out. The colour of my shirt is quite dark brown in reality, closer to what you see on the Vivo. And yeah, everything's a bit washed out on the Pixel. And that's probably my least favourite selfie here. The Vivo is pretty extreme on the sharpening, but I like it. It kind of pops. It's more contrasty and just looks a bit more dramatic overall. And Honor's kind of sitting in the middle. But if we blow these up to 200%, you can now get a closer look at my beautiful mug. Yeah, I mean, there's no contest that Vivo is the sharpest. It looks way sharper than the other two. It might not be as flattering, but I think it's just a better picture because, I mean, you can see all the small hairs in my beard. With Honor, they're kind of, you can see there's some like AI smoothing type stuff going on, which looks a little bit less realistic. And the Pixel, meanwhile, just almost looks a bit out of focus. It's nowhere near as sharp as the other two. Same shot, but now with portrait mode turned on. Pixel's still quite washed out, but it's done a good job with the cutout. All three have done a very good job with the cutout. Quite an easy scene. I was, against the sky mainly, so not that difficult, but both the Honor and the Pixel have a tendency to blur the edges of my glasses frames. You can see what I'm talking about here. Honor's started trying to blur the edge of my frame, whereas it's a sharp line on the Vivo. And to be fair, Pixel's actually nailed it this time. Although the cutout in general is a little jaggy, like there's random spikes around the side of my face. It's a smoother line on the Vivo and the Honor. Again, I'm preferring the Vivo overall. It's the sharpest, it's the most detailed, but Honor's not far behind, and Pixel's okay, but it just looks a little washed out and the colours are kind of off. Now this shot is on the ultra-wide of the church in the day. All quite similar. The Pixel's a little flatter, less contrasty, slightly paler colours. Honor has brought out the greens in the grass a little more. It's kind of exaggerated those slightly. The Vivo shot to me looks too cool. It was a very sunny day. I think Honor's got the most accurate colours on the church itself. However, I do think the grass is a little exaggerated. There's not a lot in it on this one. Honor looks the sharpest overall, but I think a lot of that is down to image processing rather than having the sharpest lens. Now this is the main lens on all three phones, obviously at the same location. Minor differences in colour. Vivo has warmed things up a bit this time, so that's looking more realistic to me. It's a lot closer to the Honor shot. And the Pixel's a little washed out, but it's very natural looking. I think the grass is probably the most natural looking of the bunch. And if we punch in and look at the details, again, Honor looks sharpest, but it does look kind of artificial as well. It's using some algorithms to bring out the brickwork here. There's not a lot in it. I'm happy with all three of these. Now these are the telephotos. Obviously they are different focal lengths. So we've got a 5x telephoto on the Pixel, 3.5 on the Honor, and 3x on the Vivo. Obviously you're going to see the most details with the Pixel, purely because it's the most zoomed in. But try not to get hung up on that. Not a lot I can do about that. So what else can we see with these images? Pixel's flatter again. The shadow detail is all there, whereas Honor's the most contrasty. Dark areas are very black in this window up here and on the clock. Vivo's somewhere in between. It's more contrasty and punchier than the Pixel image, but it's not as dark as the Honor. Honor again is looking a little artificial and very busy. You're starting to see some of that like watercolor effect, whereas I think the Pixel and the Vivo look a bit more like photos. I quite like the way the Pixel's rendering this. It looks a bit more natural, and it's still plenty sharp as well. I might give this one to the Pixel. Now these are 10x shots of each, obviously of the same subject. We're seeing the same thing with the Honor. It's very dark. It's made the clock too dark, and the shadows are a little darker than I would like. Vivo has brought out the blue tones a lot more. Pixel, while maybe not contrasty enough, has quite accurate colours here. Yeah, you can really see the AI sharpening artifacts on the Honor. The Vivo and the Pixel look better to me. There's a good amount of detail on each, but I'd take either of them over the Honor. Probably Pixel gets my vote because the blue tones in the Vivo are a little too extreme. So these photos are at maximum zoom on each phone. Obviously the Honor and Vivo can zoom a lot further. They're both at 100 times zoom, whereas the Pixel is only at 20 times zoom. Because of that, the Pixel looks miles better because it's not trying to zoom to such an extreme degree. The Honor and the Vivo both look atrocious, but the Vivo looks better than the Honor. This is mainly just to give you an idea of how far you can zoom, and maybe an idea of why you shouldn't zoom to 100x on a phone, because this is the kind of result you get. Okay, these are all on the telephoto cameras. Close-up macro shots of this very purple flower. I don't really know what happened with Pixel here. So all of them wanted to kick into macro mode, and I pressed the little button to turn macro mode off on all of them. But I've got a feeling the Pixel went back into its macro mode because it looks pretty atrocious. The Pixel telephoto definitely can't focus as close as the telephotos on the Honor and the Vivo. But whatever happened, we've got a pretty nasty image from Pixel here, and two pretty good looking images from Honor and Vivo. Honor, I would say, has got the colours the most accurate. That purple looks about spot on to me, but I do think because it's such a bright purple, you're losing some detail. Like, I think the colours are clipping slightly. Vivo's definitely changed the way the flower looks. There's areas that are too dark, there's areas that are too pale. But overall, you can see more of the detail. You can see more of these veins in the petals, and it looks the sharpest overall. Whereas Honor's not too far behind, but it's a little noisier and a little less sharp. And yeah, what can I say about the Pixel here? Something went wrong. It's really soft. The colours are all out of whack. It's super faded. I'd give this one to Vivo. Honor's not far behind. Pixel messed it up. Now these are main camera rear HD selfies, not with portrait mode on. Pretty big difference in the way each of them has rendered the scene. I do like the Vivo has the largest sensor, and because of that it's got a really shallow depth of field. It almost looks like it has portrait mode turned on, and I think that's really nice. Honor has underexposed my face slightly, but I think my t-shirt colour looks most accurate on the Honor shot. It has also blown out the highlights in the background. You can see on this wall back here, big loss of detail in the bright areas. Pixel's gone for a very natural looking image with kind of a flatter exposure, but it just looks a bit underwhelming to me. I think it looks like a phone selfie, you know. It doesn't stand out as particularly special, whereas the Vivo looks less like it was shot on a phone. I think the Honor is quite good, but the underexposure is kind of ruining it. The sharpness of the Vivo and the Honor is more impressive, but there's plenty of detail on the Pixel. They're all good shots. But for me, Vivo takes that one. Now, same shot with portrait mode turned on. On the Pixel, you don't get as many options with your portrait mode. It will always punch in slightly, give you a little crop. And you can't use the telephotos to do portrait mode shots, whereas the Honor and the Vivo both can. So it's a disadvantage there. It's kind of messed up the colours. My t-shirt isn't that colour. Honor and Vivo have got the t-shirt colour just about spot on. This time, Honor is still the darkest, but it's brought up the shadows a bit on my face. It's a much more pleasing overall image. I don't think the Vivo colours are the best. There is a sort of slight green tint on my face, but I do like the way the image looks. Pixel's good, but it's just a little less dramatic, and the colours are slightly off. If we punch in and look closer, all have done a very good job with the subject cut out. Vivo's kind of lightened up my hair a bit too much here. Also, I've noticed Vivo does a more basic cutout. It does a very accurate cutout, but it separates you from the background, but it keeps all of you in focus. Whereas you can see both Pixel and Honor are blurring my shoulders, which is what you would see with a proper mirrorless camera with this kind of depth of field. Yeah, for me, this time, I will give it to Honor. Another advantage you get with both Honor and Vivo is the ability to apply filters to your portrait shots. That doesn't seem to be an option on the Pixel. Of course, you can go into Google Photos and add whatever filter you like. Honor has the Studio Harcourt portrait mode effects. This one's Harcourt color in the middle here, and that creates some lovely warm tones that I think just look excellent. And on Vivo, I've applied the vintage filter, which is kind of infamous for just having a lovely, cool look. Whereas, you know, there's not an option on Pixel, so Pixel's just the same. No point really comparing. It's just worth pointing out that there's some really nice filters if you like that kind of thing. Okay, moving on to nighttime photos. We're on the ultra-wide, and off the bat I can see that the Pixel has gone for a slightly brighter exposure, and it's also a slightly cooler color temperature than the other two. But surprising lack of noise, because we saw a lot of noise from the ultra-wide in the day in video mode, but whatever magic Pixel is doing to reduce the noise in its tiny ultra-wide sensor is really working quite well. Pretty big lens flares. There's lens flares across the board, but I do think they are most prevalent on the Pixel. Not a lot in this one, to be honest. I think Vivo's the noisiest image of the bunch. There's some heavy noise reduction going on the Honor that's a little more obvious. Yeah, hard to choose a winner really. They're all fine. Same shot, but this time on the main lens rather than the ultra-wide. Again, we got some big lens flares from the street light. Vivo has a less noticeable lens flare on the left-hand side of the frame. I think could be that Zeiss coating on the lens, but on the other hand, on the right-hand side of the frame, those lens flares are more distracting on the Vivo. Slight differences in color rendition. The Honor and the Vivo are warmer. The Pixel's a bit colder. And the Honor's definitely the darkest. Top of the building is very dark on the Honor. Doesn't look bad, but, you know, if you're trying to get a shot of a building, you might want it all to be exposed a bit better. You can see some of the colour of the sky in the Vivo shot, whereas that's obscured by the lens flare on the other two. I think I'd give this one to Vivo, even though it is a little noisy. Telephoto shots now of this churro van. Obviously, we're at very different focal lengths, so kind of hard to compare, but we'll do what we can. Big green tint on the Vivo shot. That might be because of the video wall thing behind me. That might have been showing something green at that particular moment. But either way, the other two don't have it. The Pixel looks a little bit soft to me. Yeah, it could use a little extra sharpness. Some motion blur in both the Honor and the Vivo shot, but less on the Vivo. I like the Vivo shot even though there's a bit of a green tint, but I think Honor's almost as good. I think the Vivo's just a little bit brighter. They're all fine. Pixel's looking a little blurry to me. Now we're back on the main camera, taking a rear HD selfie. The Vivo has the largest sensor, therefore the blurriest background, which I think looks quite nice. But I think Honor might have the best skin tones in this particular case. Pixel's gone for a more natural look again. It's less contrasty. Yeah, kind of a flatter overall image, but it has the smallest sensor and therefore the least depth to the frame. Like, the background's a lot more in focus than it is on the other two shots. Honor's the darkest image, and it looks a little noisy on my jacket. I think these are all quite good. I think the Honor has the best skin tones and is a really nice image, but I think overall I prefer the Vivo because the exposure is a little better. And the Pixel's fine, it's just a little underwhelming. Now these are portrait mode shots in the same location. Obviously Pixel's cropped in again, but it's done a very good job of the cutout. You can see some slight jagginess on the brim of my cap, which isn't ideal, but other than that, it looks like a very clean cutout. Honor has done something quite dramatic here, where it's kept my eyes and nose in focus, but it's blurred the sides of my face, which, you know, is what you would see with a mirrorless camera, but I think it's done it in a kind of distracting way here. Vivo has, as always, has kept everything in focus and done a really clean cutout. Nice colours, nice vibe to the Vivo shot. I think I probably left those filters on, so yeah, this will have vintage filter on the Vivo, hardcore colour on the Honor, and just standard portrait mode on the Pixel. Honor's done some really distracting stuff with the blurring of my cheek there. It's a nice idea, and when it works well, I've seen it look really good, but in this particular case, that's not worked well. Pixel's done a great job too. It's a little jaggy on my cheek. It's not bad, it's not distracting, and I like that it's blurred my shoulders. Whereas Vivo, as always, a little more simplistic, but really clean cutout, like flawless cutout. I like the Vivo shot the best. These are cover screen selfies in the same location. Honor looks awful here. Too much sharpening. Made me really pale for some reason. Yeah, Honor's shot looks like a cheap webcam. Google's shot looks out of focus, or maybe there's motion blur or something. The background's sharper than my face is. And Vivo's just looking pretty good. The sharpening artifacts on my beard hair on both the Honor and Vivo shot, but the Vivo is miles sharper than the other two. Yeah, the Pixel's just straight up out of focus. So yeah, Vivo takes this one again. Another main lens shot now. Here I can see that Pixel and Vivo both went for a cooler tone, which I think looks really cool. There's like a bit more of a teal vibe to the car park entryway, whereas the Honor colours are probably more accurate, but it's less impactful in the image. So take your pick. Do you want accuracy or do you want a photo that looks cool? That's up to you. The red light on the traffic light, that's different on all three. Pixel's blown it out and it's almost become white. Honor has somehow managed to rein it in, and you can actually see the texture of the lens in front of the red LEDs. Vivo's just like solid red. I mean, to my eyes, it was like solid red because it was bright. I don't have that much of a preference. I'm impressed with what Honor was able to do here, but does it necessarily look better in the image? I'm not so sure. There's also lens flares at the top of the frame, and they're about the same on the Pixel and the Honor, whereas Vivo's anti-glare coating has helped it out a bit. It's still there, but it just spills a little less, which is nice. The highlights are a bit bloomier, a little more blown out on the Pixel shot. Good level of detail across the board. This one's down to personal preference. I like the Vivo shot the most because I like those cooler tones and the fact that the lens flares have been suppressed a little bit, but there's not a lot in it. Now we're over on the really dark street on the ultra-wide camera of each. Quite funny, we've got like a gradient going on here. Pixel's by far the brightest, Honor's in the middle, and Vivo's the darkest. I think we're going to need to punch in to see the details a bit more. Vivo's the sharpest, but it's also the noisiest and it's also the darkest. Pixel is super bright, it's almost made it not look like nighttime anymore, but it's pretty blurry. Honor's quite blurry too. This all depends on what you're looking for. If you're in a really dark situation and you want to brighten it up so you can see more, then the Pixel's done the best, I suppose. Vivo is the most accurate to what it looked like with my eyes, and it's also the sharpest, but it's noisy and it's really dark. Same place on the main camera of each. All looking quite good. We're seeing the same thing. Pixel's the brightest, Honor's in the middle, Vivo's very slightly darker. Vivo's also got the coolest tones, whereas there's a bit of extra warmth to the Honor and Pixel shot. In reality, the lighting was most close to what you see on the Vivo. They're white LED streetlights, they do give off a very cool tone. But I kind of like the vibe of the other two a bit more. Pixel has blown out the highlights the most. You can see that on the tail lights of that car in the distance, and the number plate light, it's all blown out, whereas they're reined in a lot better on the Honor and the Vivo. Good detail on all of them. You can read the number plates on all of them. I'd say the sharpest is either the Honor or the Vivo. It's pretty close. Vivo looks sharpest on the ground. It looks a lot sharper than the Pixel. Yeah, overall, I'd say we're seeing the same thing here. Pixel is the brightest, but it's not the sharpest. They're all quite good. I like the Vivo best. Now back on the telephotos, on the same really dark street. All of these look pretty terrible, to be honest. And because they're such different focal lengths, it's quite hard to compare the more minute details. Pixel and Vivo, in this case, have the more accurate colours. They have a cooler tone, which is what that street has. Honor's a bit too warm, a bit greeny. And here I've enlarged them so they're all the same size. But obviously that puts the Honor and Vivo at a disadvantage because they were more zoomed out. You can see in the distance there's some detail in the leaves of the trees on the Pixel and on the Honor, whereas that is just a watercolor mess on the Vivo. Vivo has for sure done the worst. The AI image processing has changed the shape of that street sign with the arrow on it. It's really distorted on the Vivo, a little bit distorted on the Honor, and less so on the Pixel. I'd give this one to the Pixel, but they're all crap. Alright, that's about it for this one. I hope you found it useful. I think if I had to buy one of these phones right now, I'd probably pick the Vivo X Fold 3 Pro. It has the largest interior screen and the brightest interior screen. The photos impress me the most often, and the battery life's awesome. But it's hard to find in a lot of places, and I don't think you'd be disappointed with any of these phones. They're all fantastic. The Pixel feels extremely well made, and it's got some really cool software features. And the Honor Magic V3 is just impossibly slim and light. Great cameras. Yeah, they're all really good. If you like this kind of thing, then hit subscribe, because there's always more stuff like this on the way. And I'll see you in the next one. Toodles!